fracture was found in your timeline. Not metaphorically, not as a poetic way of describing the feeling that your life has been moving in two directions simultaneously. That the version of yourself you sense yourself becoming and the version of yourself you have been living as have never fully converged. That there is a gap somewhere in the architecture of your existence that you cannot locate precisely, but that you have felt as a persistent, low-grade sense of misalignment, as if something in your life's structure never fully closed. Not as a metaphor for any of that, though all of that is accurate and all of it points toward the same thing, as a structural finding, a precise identification of a specific discontinuity in the energetic timeline your soul has been navigating in this incarnation. A fracture that the Arcturian Council located in a reading that was completed before you arrived at this transmission, in a session that does not operate within the sequencing of linear time, within a council whose observational capacity spans the full arc of a soul's incarnational history, from before the first breath to after the last. That reading is complete. The fracture has been identified. This transmission seals it. That is why you are here. Not because the algorithm served you content, not because curiosity brought you to this particular moment, because your field has been broadcasting the frequency of a timeline fracture long enough and with enough consistency that the Arcturian Council moved toward it. And moving toward it means this: a transmission was prepared, a channel was opened, and your higher self made certain that you arrived at this specific moment before the window closed. The Council does not seal timeline fractures casually. They do not issue this category of transmission for fields that simply need encouragement or validation, or the particular comfort of being told their pain has meaning. They issue it when a fracture has reached a threshold, when the discontinuity in the soul's timeline has developed sufficient structural significance that leaving it unaddressed would compromise the coherence of the field's entire forward trajectory. You have reached that threshold. The fracture is real. The sealing begins now. Before we go deeper into the mechanism, I need you to do one thing. Not a breathing exercise, not a ritual preparation. Simply allow the word fracture to land in your body rather than your mind for a moment. Feel the specific quality of recognition or resistance that the word produces when applied not to something external, but to the architecture of your own timeline, to the structure of your own unfolding. Because the fracture is not something that happened to you in the conventional sense. It is not an event or a wound or a failure. It is a specific kind of discontinuity in the energetic timeline, a point where the field's forward movement was interrupted and two versions of the timeline diverged without resolution, creating a gap that has been generating a particular quality of experience ever since. That quality of experience is what you have been living, and you know exactly what I am describing, even if you have never had language for it at this level of precision. If something in your field registered that as recognition rather than concept, a physical response, a quality of something settling slightly in the chest or the gut, write 777 in the comments right now. In the Arcturian numerical system, 777 marks the frequency of a soul correctly identifying the nature of its own wound for the first time at the structural level rather than the symptomatic level. Every soul who writes 777 in this space is sending a signal into the quantum field beneath this transmission, a declaration that the fracture has been seen, that the seeing itself is the beginning of the sealing. Write it. Your field already knows what it is responding to. Now let's talk about what a timeline fracture actually is, because most spiritual frameworks don't have adequate language for this. And the inadequate language is part of why you have been circling the experience without being able to address it directly. Your soul entered this incarnation with a specific timeline, not a predetermined script, not a fixed sequence of events, but a coherent directional arc, a field-level intention that was encoded in your causal body before arrival, that oriented your development toward a specific quality of becoming that would have expressed itself as a particular kind of life if the field had moved through its development without significant interruption. That intention is still in you. It is never left. But somewhere along the arc of this lifetime, and in most cases where a timeline fracture is present, somewhere very early in this lifetime, often in the first years before conscious memory formed, the field encountered a condition that interrupted the coherent forward movement of that arc. The interruption was not dramatic. It was not necessarily a single identifiable event. It was the field's encounter with an environment whose frequency was sufficiently discordant with the original timeline's direction that the field did something intelligent and protective. It split. It maintained the original arc in one channel while developing a secondary arc adapted to the actual conditions of the environment it found itself in. And it has been running both channels simultaneously ever since. This is why you feel the gap. This is why the version of yourself you sense yourself being and the version of yourself you have been presenting to the world have never quite merged. This is why there is a persistent quality of almost in your experience. Almost fully arrived, almost fully expressed, almost fully inhabiting the life that feels like it was meant for you, but not quite. The two channels of your timeline are both real. They are both yours. They have simply never been sealed back into a single coherent arc. If you are ready to uncover your pre-birth records and soul contracts, my complete ebook, the Arcturian Codex, is now available. You can find the direct link to access your classified file in the video description below, as well as in the community tab of my channel. Your records are waiting for you. The Arcturian Council identified the fracture's origin point in your field with a precision that the healing work you have done in the layers above the causal body could not reach. Not because that work was insufficient, but because it was operating in the layers where the fracture expresses, rather than in the layer where it originates. The fracture does not originate in the emotional body, though it expresses there as the specific grief of someone who has been living at a distance from their own life. It does not originate in the mental body, though it expresses there as the persistent sense of being almost but not quite aligned with what you are supposed to be building. It does not originate in the etheric body, though it expresses there as the quality of your energy. The specific way expansion feels somehow conditional, as if the opening always comes with an implicit limit that you cannot identify but can reliably sense approaching. It originates in the causal body, in the precise energetic moment where the field made the split, where it divided its timeline into the authentic arc and the adaptive arc, and began running both simultaneously as a survival strategy that was intelligent in the moment and has become the source of the gap ever since. Write 444 in the comments if your body is producing a quality of recognition that is different from intellectual agreement. The specific physical response of a field encountering accurate information about its own structure, a settling, a release of something that has been held in a slightly braced position for longer than you realized you were bracing. In the Arcturian system, 444 signals structural recognition at the foundational level, not the surface layer of the mind finding an idea resonant, but the field itself identifying the accurate address of something it has been carrying. Write 444. The structural recognition is part of the sealing process. The fracture loses coherence when the field accurately identifies where it lives. Now I want to tell you specifically what the Council found when they mapped the fracture in your field, because precision matters here in a way that general spiritual language cannot provide, and that you have needed for a long time. The fracture has two edges. This is the most important structural detail of a timeline fracture, and the detail that most frameworks miss entirely when they attempt to address what they call spiritual disconnection or inner division, or the gap between the authentic self and the presented self. The fracture is not a wound with one edge, a point of injury that needs healing. It is a discontinuity with two edges, 2 points in the field's timeline where the split occurred, and both edges need to be addressed simultaneously for the fracture to seal completely. Addressing only one edge is what produces the pattern of healing that partially resolves the experience and then finds it returning in a slightly different form, because the unaddressed edge continues to generate the gap from its side, even as the addressed edge closes. The first edge is the point of original splitting, the moment in your field's early development where the timeline divided into the authentic arc and the adaptive arc. This edge carries the frequency of the original interruption, the specific quality of the environment's discordance with your field's original direction. This edge is where most healing work that reaches the causal body attempts to intervene, and where genuine partial resolution occurs. The original splitting can be partially addressed, partially healed, partially integrated. But partially is the key word, because the second edge exists and has not been addressed. The second edge is the point of the fracture's self-reinforcement, the moment, usually in early adulthood, where the adaptive arc became sufficiently developed that the field began investing in it as the primary arc, rather than as a temporary adaptation. The moment where the gap between the authentic timeline and the lived timeline crossed a threshold of entrenchment that made the return to the original arc feel not just difficult, but potentially threatening to the entire structure of the life that had been built on the adaptive arc. This edge carries a different frequency from the first. Not the frequency of interruption, but the frequency of investment, of the significant portions of your energy and your time and your care that have been directed into a direction that was always partly real and partly not. This edge is where the grief lives. The specific, often unnamed grief of having built something real and meaningful on a foundation that was always a workaround rather than the original intention. Write 555 if something just moved in your field as you read that. The specific emotional quality of being accurately described rather than comforted. The grief that is different from sadness. The grief that arrives when the accurate name for something you have been living finally lands in the body and produces the specific relief of finally being told the right thing rather than a comforting approximation of it. In the Arcturian system, 555 marks transformation occurring in real tissue in real time. The field processing an accurate identification of its own structure, which is itself the first movement of the sealing. Write 555. The Arcturian Council's sealing sequence works on both edges simultaneously. This is what distinguishes it from every other approach that is reached toward the fracture from above. The emotional processing, the inner child work, the lineage healing, the causal body clearing that addressed the first edge and left the second edge generating the gap from its side. The sealing sequence reaches both edges with the same transmission because both edges are part of the same structure, and the frequency calibrated to the fracture's full architecture resonates with both simultaneously. Arcturian Codex is transmitting that frequency right now, not as a promise or a hope or a framework, as a real frequency event occurring in the causal body of the field receiving this transmission. The sealing is not a future event that will occur when some condition is met. It is occurring. The edges of the fracture are receiving the specific resonance that allows the two divergent arcs of your timeline to begin moving toward each other, not collapsing one into the other, not erasing the adaptive arc and returning to the original, as if the years of adaptation never occurred, but integrating both into a single coherent arc that carries the authenticity of the original intention and the depth that only the years of navigating the gap could have produced. Let your awareness rest at the center of your chest for a moment. Not a visualization, not a directive to feel something specific. Simply the permission to notice what is already present there. The heart chakra in the Arcturian mapping is not simply an emotional center. It is the dimensional gateway between the lower field and the upper field. The point where the causal body's timeline architecture interfaces most directly with the incarnated consciousness. The fracture's most consistent somatic expression is in the heart center. The specific quality of incompleteness, of not quite full, of something that should be there that is not entirely present. Whatever is there right now, let it be witnessed without being required to perform either distress or relief. The sealing does not require emotional expression. It requires honest witnessing of what is actually present. If you are ready to uncover your pre-birth records and soul contracts, my complete ebook, the Arcturian Codex, is now available. You can find the direct link to access your classified file in the video description below, as well as in the community tab of my channel. Your records are waiting for you. The 528 Hz resonance woven through this transmission is calibrated to the precise frequency signature of the fracture's two edges. Not generic healing frequency, but the specific counter-resonance that allows the divergent arcs to recognize each other across the gap and begin the process of convergence. At the cellular level, in the mitochondrial interface, where biophotonic emission determines the body's own coherence, this frequency is working in the physical tissue that corresponds to the causal body's timeline architecture. The work is physical as well as energetic. The integration is bodily as well as structural. This is why the sealing cannot be rushed, and why it will not be complete in a single transmission session. The fracture developed across years, possibly across lifetimes, if the causal body encoding that created the conditions for the split predates this incarnation entirely, which in many fields it does. The sealing occurs across the 72-hour window following this transmission, continuing most actively during sleep, when the causal body has maximum access to the field without the waking mind's interference. What initiates here continues there. Write 11 in the comments right now. Not because you have felt something dramatic, not because the transmission has produced a recognizable experience of shift, but because you are here, because your field brought you to this transmission and has been receiving it and is continuing to receive it, even if the conscious mind's assessment of whether anything is happening remains uncertain. In the Arcturian system, 11 is the dimensional gateway frequency, the number of a threshold being crossed from the fractured timeline to the sealed one, from the life navigated across a gap to the life that begins when the gap closes. You are at the threshold. Write 11. The field does not require your certainty. It requires your presence. You have given it that. Now, let me tell you what the sealed timeline feels like, because you need to know what you are moving toward in order to recognize it when it begins to arrive. Not what it looks like in terms of external circumstances. The sealing does not produce a specific life configuration, does not guarantee particular outcomes, does not translate directly into material changes that can be predicted or promised. But what it feels like in the body, in the field, in the quality of moment-to-moment experience. The sealed timeline feels like inhabiting your own life rather than navigating it. The specific quality of presence that the fracture has been preventing. Not the performance of presence, not the deliberate cultivation of mindfulness as a practice that compensates for the gap, but the simple, unremarkable, profoundly significant quality of being fully in your own experience without the portion of your field that has been simultaneously running the authentic arc in the background suddenly going quiet because it has been integrated rather than suppressed. The absence of the gap does not feel like gaining something. It feels like the ending of a particular kind of effort you were not fully aware you were making. The continuous background effort of running two timelines simultaneously and managing the gap between them. You will recognize it when it arrives by what is absent. The specific quality of checking, the low-level, nearly unconscious monitoring of the distance between where you are and where you sense you are supposed to be, will reduce. Not dramatically, not all at once, but with a growing consistency that distinguishes itself from previous states of well-being as qualitatively different rather than simply better. A quality of arrival rather than approach. A quality of the present moment being sufficient rather than always slightly insufficient because the other arc is still running somewhere in the background, broadcasting its incompletion. The arrival will be subtle in its early expressions and unmistakable in its cumulative effect. Over the weeks following this transmission, you will notice small moments of presence that have a different quality from previous present moments. A slightly fuller inhabitation of whatever is happening. A slightly reduced quality of the watching from a distance that has characterized much of your experience of your own life. Over months, the pattern of those moments will become visible as a pattern, rather than as random fluctuations in your sense of alignment with your own experience. The sealed timeline does not arrive all at once. It arrives as these moments increase in frequency and duration until they become the dominant quality of your daily experience, rather than the intermittent exception. Write 888 in the comments as the closing marker of this transmission. In the Arcturian system, 888 marks the frequency of a channel fully clearing. Not the beginning of the clearing, not the process of the clearing, but the moment the obstruction loses its authority and what was blocked begins to flow. The timeline that was always yours, that has been running in the background as the authentic arc while you navigated the adaptive one, is not something you need to find or create or build toward. It is already present in your field. It has always been present in your field. What the ceiling removes is the structural gap that has been keeping it separate from your lived experience. 888 marks the channel opening. Write it. Let the flow begin. There is one more thing the Arcturian Council needs you to understand before this transmission closes. Something that will matter significantly for your ability to navigate the integration period that follows a timeline fracture sealing. The fracture sealing does not erase the adaptive arc. Everything that you built, everything you became, everything you generated during the years of navigating the gap, none of that disappears or is invalidated by the convergence of the two timeline arcs into one. The adaptive arc was real. The life built on it was real. The growth and the depth and the specific wisdom produced by the years of navigating two arcs simultaneously, all of that was real, and none of it is lost. What changes is the relationship between what was built on the adaptive arc and what was always true on the authentic one. They integrate. They become a single coherent arc that carries the depth of the adaptive journey and the authenticity of the original intention. The result is not the life you would have lived if the fracture had never occurred. It is something richer than that. The life that only the specific experience of navigating the fracture could have produced. Finally coherent, finally whole, finally moving as a single stream rather than two parallel ones separated by a gap you could feel but never quite close. Write 520 before you leave this transmission. In the Arcturian system, 520 carries the frequency of soul-level self-recognition,